with this pretty little toy. No power on Etheria will be able to stop me.
Hey fans, Shadow Weaver Weekend continues with the new Club Grayskull Shadow Weaver. So some years back, a classics version of Shadow Weaver was offered through MattyCollector.com, Mattel's website, and you couldn't just order this one like all of the other monthly figures. You actually had to, I believe, put in a subscription, 1-year subscription or a certain number of figures subscription. And for subscribers who committed to getting a figure every single month, regardless of the figure, they got Shadow Weaver. And that is why this one has gone up quite a bit in price. So I was able to snag this one when it first came out for a little more than the typical figure, but it has really skyrocketed in price. And in my classics collection that you see back here, I like to have one figure opened out in front and then a boxed version of the figure in behind. And I was able to do that because when these first were released, they were pretty affordable. So it wasn't too difficult to open one and keep one sealed in box. Couldn't really do that with this figure. It was too expensive to get two of, so for years and years now I've had this sealed Shadow Weaver figure out in the back corner there, waiting for the day when either Mattel or another company like Super 7 would reissue it or make another version of it. And that day has come, because now there is a Club Grayskull or Filmation version of Shadow Weaver that everyone can get now for a much lower price than the original classics version. And it is available like the Super 7 vintage style Shadow Weaver I just took a look at. This one is available on Big Bad Toy Store, and it is a fraction of the price of this one that you'll see at toy shows or on eBay. So we're going to do some comparisons after I get this box open. But the box is similar to all of the other Club Grayskull releases. It's a box with a slipcover on it. And it's a really beautiful, glossy slipcover to it with the door of Grayskull. And on the top, there's a window there. The slipcover slides off nice and easily, revealing the figure inside. With a very big window, so you can see the figure and all of the accessories that are included. And then on the back, these always have some Filmation artwork on them. So it looks like a still or recreation from the original Lou Scheimer Filmation series, with some text on the bottom here telling you a little bit about who Shadow Weaver is, her history, and her involvement with the evil horde. And because the top of the box has these little windows in it, you can have light passing through. So if you have overhead lighting and you like to stack these on a shelf, you'll be able to light the figure from overhead. And it's a resealable box, which is what's really, really, really nice about these Club Grayskull releases. You get to enjoy the figure both opened as well as resealed. And it's packed securely in this plastic clamshell. Got some wires, wire ties in the back securing it. Hey, that's interesting. It's a wire and one of those rubber bands holding it in. And here is Shadow Weaver released from her magical tomb. And it's not quite as spectacular as that vintage style Shadow Weaver is, because that other one it's very glossy. This one has more of a matte. It's got a little shine to it, but a little more of a matte finish on it. No cloth on it, just this rubber flap, and there's a little bit of this residue, I guess from the injection molding, that you can just wipe off. But it's the same shape. It's got this kind of jagged pattern cut into it. as the vintage style one does. And it does include a couple of accessories. The vintage style one, which I'll bring out in a moment to compare, came with this style of wand with a ball on it, and I don't believe it glows in the dark. Nope, nothing glow in the dark there. And the vintage style one also came with this one too. The difference on these though, and look at them pop. If you have the right lighting, these really pop. The tops are made of translucent plastic. So even though it doesn't glow in the dark, it's got that Inhumanoid's glow in the light look to it. So you can have it sort of lit up if the light is hitting it just right. This one is just like the other one with a flame on it, and a third staff is included. Or no, I don't believe this is a staff. This might be some sort of projectile, magical projectile. It's got an interesting tip to it. Maybe it's supposed to be held in the hand and fired like that, maybe? I don't know, that's an interesting idea. Since the end on this is so bulbous and the hand can't actually open, you can see it's totally enclosed. It's joined right there, so this hand, the staff gripping hand, all you can do is slide these stabs in from the top. You won't be able to pry the hand open like on most classics or Club Grayskull figures, and that's a little bit of a tight squeeze too. So this one is too bulbous to fit in there, so she can't hold this one. The only other hand is this one, which is pretty wide open, and it doesn't look like she's able to grip that very well. I'm not really getting what this is supposed to be for. It can't be a stand. She does have that's peculiar, a hole in the bottom of the figure. And after checking the back of the clamshell packaging, she does have a stand, which looks the same as the one that came with the vintage style figure. So this is it feels like a much more rubbery material than the vintage style one. The vintage style one is it's very it's got a little bit of give to it, but it feels a little more rigid. This is more that typical classics rubber, easy to pop in, pop out. You don't hear any cracking. There's no seam on the bottom there. So that goes in a lot easier. It also feels like it's not quite as high as the vintage one. So I think that actually looks quite a bit nicer than the vintage style figure on its stand. Just the fact that it isn't raised up quite as much makes it look like it's actually floating. The other issue with the vintage style one is that the dress on the bottom of the vintage style one is completely flat. This one is not flat, almost, but you can see a little bit of a gap right there, and on the back and on the side. So just those little gaps right there add a little bit of a flowing look to the dress, making it look more natural as if it's floating, whereas the other one, it looks like it was intended to be sitting flat on the ground. Articulation is pretty much the same as any classics figure. There's not really a 360 in the shoulder because of this cape that gets in the way. There's this swivel right up here, bicep swivel. There's an elbow bend, which is impeded a little bit by the sculpting of the costume. There's also this long flowing piece hanging off of the forearm, which doesn't really get in the way of anything, but you would want to line up the way they flow. So that's one of the things with this costume that doesn't quite look right, where the costume is flowing down here, but then flowing this way over here. You'd want them lined up, so that sort of does limit some of the posability of it. There is a wrist swivel, and what would have been really nice here is that He-Man wrist articulation going up and down, because this just feels to me like it's pointing down too much. It'd be nice if she could actually point a little higher. It just seems like the wrist is pointing down a little too much. No legs on this, it's all dress, but there's still quite a bit of articulation in the waist. She does have a waist twist right here. It's quite a bit of range. It doesn't look like it would be much, but because this belt piece right here is soft, rubbery material, it allows for, look at that. How's that for black magic? A complete 360 waist swivel. And she also does have a bit of an ab crunch or upper chest crunch, which doesn't really want to stay. It's very, very limited. But at least it's hidden in the sculpt. And head articulation is 360 also. Quite a bit better than the vintage style figure, again because of the softer rubbery material of the figure. And she's also got the hood hanging on the back there, and much more rubbery on this one as well. This part sort of looks like it's supposed to plug into a cannon, so I'm wondering if it was maybe intended for a different character. I see that sometimes in those third-party Transformers toys. Fans Toys will include accessories for some of their other releases, like a different face for another character. So this Filmation style Hordak came with a cannon arm, and you can sort of wedge it in there. I don't know if it's really intended for that, but it just looks like those Transformers Siege blast effects. So that's actually not too bad. I like how that looks. Very dynamic. As far as using it with Shadow Weaver, there's no real way for her to hold it. This reminds me of a Power of the Force 2, I believe, Emperor figure. Could shoot lightning, and they had holes in this part of his robe, so maybe you could try to wedge. You can't really, though, it's not deep enough. Try to wedge it in there and have her hold it. It's, well, I guess that sort of works, but it's very touchy. That's the best that I can get it to look, and it doesn't really look right to me. It looks more like a blaster bolt than some sort of magical spell. I just picture, if it's a magical spell, it'll be more spirally and windy. But as a blaster bolt effect, I like how it looks on this Hordak. And here is the classic style Shadow Weaver with the vintage style one, and pop the stand in there. And as I said, this one just looks like it's floating too much, but the stand works a lot better on that one. And this one just is so much shinier. It looks like a brand new shiny toy you discovered locked away in a warehouse somewhere back from 1987. And this one just looks like all the rest. It looks cool. It's kind of more of a been there, done that type of look. And in terms of height, we will take the stands off of both of them. And the classics are always a little bit taller. These stands are not identical, actually. One has a bottom to it, and the other one doesn't. That's interesting. I thought they would be identical, but they're not. And also, the vintage style one is kind of a more pink, fuchsia-looking color to it. A little bit brighter. Definitely not the color that it looked in the pictures for me. I thought that both of these were going to be a lighter, softer, pink-looking color, but in person, I love the color of this one. It really pops. It's very nice. And this one is fine. It's just more subdued. And a few more comparisons. Here's a Filmation Club Grayskull Trapjaw. So she is a little shorter than old Trappy. And in relation to one of the other female figures, this is another sorceress. It is the Sorceress of Grayskull, Club Grayskull Filmation version, which we took a look at on the channel a while back. And the Sorceress is a little taller than Shadow Weaver too. I like that. I like the height difference. Shadow Weaver is kind of a weaselly character. She's always hissing and scheming, so I like that she's a little bit smaller. And then the original Filmation version of He-Man, and the most powerful man in the universe, is taller than Shadow Weaver as well. Even though that she is a Filmation version of Shadow Weaver, I think she doesn't really strike me as a cartoon design of the character as much as these other Filmation style characters do. And the comparison I've been waiting the longest time for is comparing Shadow Weaver with the original Classics version of Shadow Weaver. And the original one is much darker, a much darker color. And I thought this one would be too bright, but I figured, you know, whatever, it's fine. I thought this one was going to be much lighter pink and not go with the original version as well. But even though they're not that close in shade, it's closer than I thought it was going to be. And now that I'm taking a closer look at this original Shadow Weaver, I thought this was just going to be a repaint, and it doesn't appear as though it is. This one has articulation here in the hips. She can actually, it looks like, bend forward there, and it's missing on this one. She has one leg elegantly pointing forward as if she's in a walking position. And it's hard for me to tell, but if I'm lining up the bases here, it looks like the one in the box might be taller as well. I'm seeing all sorts of differences here. There is also a waist articulation in the one in the box, and there's no cut there in the waist, so different ab sculpt. I didn't realize that this was going to have so many different new parts to it, so that's a surprise. Even the end of the hood is different. It sticks up much more in the boxed one and hangs down. I prefer this one in every single way, actually. The staff is even better in the Filmation one. I like that bright green bulb to the end of it. It's just clear on the original version, and you can see it's bent. Like so many of these accessories in the packaging, it just got warped in the packaging. So yeah, I am pleasantly surprised by this Filmation version. I was just expecting something like the Ultimates releases, where it was a repaint with a couple extras. But this looks like it's a vastly improved version of that Shadow Weaver. That's really cool, and I think they will go nicely for people who want to display one boxed, like I have here, and one opened. It's close enough that it doesn't look like they clash. But if I had to open one, I would definitely want this one opened and on display and be able to futz around with it and keep this one sealed in box. And I almost forgot, this one, just like the vintage style one, when you pull the hood, You get a magic spell for that wand. And same goes for this one, just like on the vintage one. Give the hood a little tug. And burn, baby, burn. And like on the vintage style one, she can cast spells with her other hand. That's the classic style, Filmation style, Club Grayskull style, Shadow Weaver. So cool that a version of this figure has finally been released for everyone that missed out on the Matty Collector exclusive all those years ago. Good things come to those who wait. And we've got a improved version, in my opinion, even though I've never opened the original version. I prefer this one. I think it's awesome and will make a great display piece and complete any Classics Horde collection. Shout out to the Patreon tribe. Thanks to each and every one of you who have put down $1 or more to support this channel. It means so much to me. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your love. I'm glad to hear that you're all having fun, interacting with each other, interacting with me, and enjoying the Patreon exclusives as well. Feel free to share the video, leave a comment below, and to join the tribe, cast a spell on subscribe. Nerdmaste.